I haven't spoken before, so kind of nervous. I get performance anxiety, but hopefully I don't pass out on you guys and cause a crisis. Today I wanted to talk about culture in the workplace, because in my experience it's been a pretty critical issue on retaining talent, keeping people around, and to have your business actually grow and deliver and get products done. I've worked in California for 13 years in the San Diego area, and then like San Francisco area and stuff, and recruiting there is just horrible. It's so hard to find people, and I know I've heard so many people at this conference say how they're hiring, and trying to find good talent is so difficult. And when you find the talent, when you assemble the team, you want to keep them, because you want to invest in them and you want to grow them, but there's so much opportunity that it's hard to do. So my presentation is really to have a conversation with you guys about this, and I'd really like if you guys were interactive, because I don't think I have enough material to keep talking. I could probably keep talking, but probably get tired of it. So, all right, so for myself, I'm just trying to establish some credibility. I bought myself a suit jacket at the charity shop, so you guys thought I was important or something, but I come from Portland, Oregon, and I started kind of started hacking on Perl at the beginning of my career, my real career. I've been messing around with like electronics and computers since I was a kid, bulletin boards and all that stuff. But I picked up a book somewhere, and it was about CGI programming with Perl, and it really just sunk in. Like I understood it right away, and I could start writing code, start being effective, and that really kind of launched my career. And I was really, I don't know, it's grateful for the community and all the work everyone's done to give me a career with Perl. And in my career, I've been able to continue working on it, whether it's on back end, front end, and things like that. So I've done tons of systems. I've been, working on it for a couple decades now. But most recently been doing like more of the executive level management stuff, but my management tech or strategy is also just to stay coding, so I always find ways to do that. My wife and I this year have been traveling all year since January, and so our daughter went off to university, and we sold all our stuff and just took off. And so that's been quite a different lifestyle. So I happened to be able to make it to Glasgow, which is awesome, because I haven't been to a Perl conference yet in all my career, even though it's been such a huge part of what I've been able to do. So anyway, that's why you'll see me with a giant backpack and my guitar and my wife's giant backpacks and all that stuff. So anyway, I've been able to be involved in a couple different acquisition phases too, which is I think also important to talk about, which I'll get into later, and also from kind of the outset of a new product and the Perl selection and why we chose Perl, and also what kind of problems that came about because of that. Okay, so Perl, this is my slide. This is a good one. You guys are you're all familiar with kind of the working state of like what's happening in the community and what other competition there is in languages and projects and job opportunities and what the cool kids are doing and what what code is out there. Young folks don't seem to be learning Perl, and they're learning it on the job by people like you or by companies that have it in place and kind of because they need to. But it's so competitive for just a technology that it's hard to attract people. It's hard to keep people interested in that when there's just so much variety. And I think just by the nature of curiosity, a lot of engineers, they're creatives and they want to do new things. They want to get involved in things that are interesting to them. And a lot of times those don't include Perl projects because they're not on the cusp. You can't, they don't have like blockchain written in Perl, or I'm sure they do, but it's not like Ethereum's based on Perl, it's based on Golang, and so just my point here is we're aware of the competition on what developers are, what options they have. I am curious with the code bases. I was going to ask you guys, how many of you guys are using Moose or Catalyst or Moose Flavor in your stacks? It's about half. Nice. I think for me it was a big distinction being able to use Moose and Catalyst in my projects and win people over because of it, because it's something closer to what they understand. But I'll talk about that in a second. What have we got? Team processes. Oh. So, how many do you guys have product teams, like like non-technical product heads and people that are making decisions and filling the backlog and creating stories and designing the product that aren't the engineers themselves? No? Sometimes. I bring them up just because with team process, like they're pretty integral to the engineering team themselves, and oftentimes you'll see that they're kind of off doing their own thing, but a lot of times those engineers are just relying on the product owners or the product people to create artifacts or create things for them to use. And I've just seen that has been a problem with those the product teams not being integrated with the engineers to make it a good feedback loop to keep everything moving very smoothly. One of the successful things in my teams is, and I put a Bruce Lee quote up here, is really it's only using what really works for your team. I think each team individually is going to work well with a different set of tools, or they're going to work well with a different set of management around it. And I've been in teams where we try to impose like a particular kind of Scrum process that just it wastes people's time. And really, in a team, you can't waste time. It costs so much money and so much opportunity, and so in your processes that you establish for your engineers, make sure that it really makes sense and it's a good use of their time. Set up tools so that it really makes it easy for them to do exactly what you want them to do. If they need to be estimating stories, make it easy for them to just log all that stuff. If whatever the particular kind of management task, to manage the backlog or to manage the release or whatever, just has to be simple. Can't be a burden. Otherwise, it's just not going to get done. You're going to get chasing them, or it's going to irritate people. continuous delivery, I think that's achieving continuous delivery is kind of a dream zone to get into, so that you can not deviate your branches from master to production too long. You guys probably already know this, but making steps towards achieving continuous delivery, I think, is a good investment in your teams. The team communication, that's, like I said, that's a no-brainer. Just being able to make sure that you're getting access to the people that they need to in order to get their job done. You have a note here, it just says don't paralyze yourself with process. And that's just going back to not creating too much overhead for your engineers to deal with. Keep it as lean as you need to, just so that you can report back or estimate or do the things that you need to do as a manager to get the product out. I have a note here about the communication too. I'm a huge fan of diagrams and using whiteboards and communicating in various means that are going to be able to get the message across to non-technical users and technical users just as quick as possible. And diagrams, I think, do an amazing job at that. So even if it's drawing it out on a piece of paper, photographing it, and attaching it to Slack or whatever, use your webcam, just something quick and dirty is fine. It doesn't have to be Visio. It doesn't have to be something that's kind of a pain to put together. And also use video chat as often as you can. I've worked with a lot of remote teams or managed teams that are in other cities or other countries, and video chat's just been crucial. There's so much that gets lost from just body language that you can't read, and there's a lot of miscommunication or misreading of situations that can be avoided just by being on video. And I think it helps to cross a bridge too, to make people feel a little bit more included, because when you have a group of people in a room, they're interacting and there's an energy happening, and when you're working from home, you're not really part of it, you're cut off. And doing whatever you can to get included into that energy, I think, is really important to help keep the team together. Let me see here. I think I took too many notes at the bottom of my slide because it's just, okay. What I'm talking about here is just some things that I like to hold on to for my teams. I think one of the most important ones that I like to push is the design patterns. Being able to distinguish what design pattern is being used, what is named, like incorporating that into your communication. Just the language of a design pattern, like an iterator or singleton or whatever these standard software engineering design patterns that people know, it's really going to help get people to understand the code that they're looking at. It'll self-document if you use that language, but I think it also helps to satisfy the curiosity of other languages and kind of people wandering to other things, because particularly I've found with Moose, I'm able to implement a lot of design patterns and be able to describe them, and that's been, I'd say, a key aspect in my documentation that has helped drive an acquisition, because when the auditing team is looking at the code and they can't understand it, or they don't, they think, oh, it's just Perl, this is going to be, not good, or they come in with some preconception. I can walk through the code, or I can refactor the code to use the language or use Moose in order to be able to point to it or to describe it in terms that the other teams understand, or the auditors or whoever you're working with. So I have also had people on the team that have read design patterns books just to help them to understand the language and to have like a book club or a study group that they could get more familiar with it and be able to point it out or identify it within the code, which has been great. I just put, the white spacing is annoying if you guys are all doing different things using different editors. So it'd be good to have it enforced so that you're not constantly having a hard time reading the code. Just standardize on something. Usage of Docker. You had a talk on that this morning, and I think that's been using Docker has been awesome, having the immutable environments to be able to run your code in, and then you're not worrying about all your dependency management and your machine state and all these problems that can occur just from having to manage developers' environment versus production. Makes releases much easier too. So aim to use Docker, or Vagrant might be worthwhile maybe, but Docker's been great. If you can, design your systems to be stateless so that that's just one concern you don't have to complicate your application stack with. I have the debugging in here. Funny enough, that seems to be one of the, with all the Perl developers I've worked with over the years, I'd say debugging is something I've seen a lot of weakness in. Like, people don't use the Perl debugger. They're using print statements, and they're creating a lot of extra work for themselves. But if you spend time with your guys to teach them how to use the debugger and how to set breakpoints and how to use it in the most, I don't know if I'd say advanced, but the most useful ways, it's worth the time, because you can really help somebody be much more efficient and work through problems super quick. So spend time, have your people spend time working on that and getting good at it, and maybe having some shared discoveries and things like that. I'm going to move on. There was the refactoring. I liked Curtis's talk the other day when he was talking about refactoring. I think he covered a lot of critical information, and one of the things that I've also done that Curtis showed how he had put together this spreadsheet that would show kind of these rankings on stories and the value to the business and the complexity, all these different kind of metrics that he could assign to a particular story. I would do that with feature sets that we have, and to really help us understand if it's worth keeping the feature set. Because if you have a product that has 50 features, but there's 2 features that consume 75% of your customer support, or they keep finding bugs, or if it's just consuming a lot of time in order to keep those features, but you're not really making a significant amount of money, or it's not really pushing the sale over the top, or if it's a low value to the customer, it might be worth getting rid of. So keep an eye out for those types of things so that you're keeping your product, your feature set, you're delivering value to your customer, but you're also not just keeping something alive just because it's, people throw it in the shopping cart, or it's something that just is kind of part of the standard deal or the sale, but maybe the customer doesn't really care. So, and I think that happens. How many guys here have continuous integration running? It's less than half, yeah. Yeah, and, I've seen that too. It does seem to be ambitious to set up when you don't have it, or maybe you don't feel like you need it. But especially when you combine continuous integration with something like Docker, where you can run, even if it's just lint testing, if you're just doing like a Perl-WC or whatever you want on just to see if the environment has all the modules that you need, or if it's, if you don't have the unit test done, I think it's still worthwhile to create the continuous integration environment. And nowadays it's pretty easy. Like, you can set up Jenkins, throw it on any machine that you have, or you can, create a EC2 instance with it, or whatever you want. There's tons of options, but continuous integration is, I think, a good bar. Perl best practices has tons. I mean, that whole book has tons of great stuff in it. So if you haven't read it yet, you might want to copy for your office and check it out. It's one of those things too. You adopt and incorporate what works for your team or what's good. It has a lot of style and particular like coding standards around how you might do particular structures and things like that. So it's good to have something that you can all point to and understand and do together, so that you can all work on each other's stuff and it won't be difficult. Code reviews. Code reviews seem to be one of those things that it's difficult to justify the time spent, because it takes so much time. It usually winds up being a bottleneck in the release cycle. How many of you guys do code reviews? That's good. That's more than half. So I don't have to talk about that. I mean, it's just, if you can afford to, it's worthwhile, and you can learn stuff and share information too. Let's see if I had any others. Does anyone use Perl Tidy? Is that something? Oh wow, a lot of you guys. How's that been? Like, is it part of your pre-commit stage? Is it part of like the code review? Like, how do you enforce Perl Tidy getting done? Mm-hmm. Mm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So you just have it, you highlight your text in VI and... Mm-hmm. Yeah. Nice. Anybody else want to share about what they do?
We're doing Git hook,
Mm-hmm.
and then also on merge request as an extra check, and also a simple unit test that would check it during continuous integration.
Mm-hmm.
Our big advantage is that it makes our commits a lot smaller, because there's not the back and forth that between two authors of white space chunks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's great. I haven't been successful at implementing it, but it was more at the developer training, and we have like using GitHub, which I don't think we can do the same kind of pre-commits on GitHub. And anyhow, I think that's great that it can be done, and you guys are doing that. All right. Here's just a slide about business standards, and something that my team has told me before is just not having a vision or not really being clear on what we're trying to do is, it can be distressing. And the business might have a goal of growing. They want more revenue. Maybe they want to just maintain. Maybe they want to just make as much money from the customers that they already have. Do they want new features, or do they want to just incorporate it and do an integration into their ecosystem? Like there's the company might have a goal that's not really product feature related, but just understanding what the company's vision is for your product and for what you're doing. It's important to be able to state it in a sentence or a couple sentences and be able to share that with your team so that they understand. The second bullet point about merging incompatible teams, I've seen that can be really painful. And for example, a Unix team working with a Windows team where they approach the problems in such an entirely different method. And it's not that either of them is necessarily wrong or right, although I've always worked in Linux environments, so it kind of just, you automatically wind up being part of a particular team, like, or a part of a particular camp, and that can lead to just, misunderstandings or aggravation about how to approach a problem or how to solve a problem or how to fix something. And then you start thinking about, well, maybe I can just rewrite the whole stack and put it into my Linux environment or vice versa. And those are high-risk changes, and Curtis went over that the other day on how it could really snowball into something that's not where you want to be as a business. So if you are thinking of acquisition and it's an entirely different kind of a technology stack, that's something to be aware of, that those can be in conflict unless you intend on running them completely separate, which could work. I don't need to read off the slide, but the thing about equipping your team is really you want your team to be efficient with their time, because developers are expensive. They're going to be much more expensive than a new laptop, or working from home, being able to equip somebody with decent monitor and things that, or an extra mouse or whatever they might need. View those expenses, those things that engineers are asking for, take them seriously, because they're however much more efficient or more time that you can get from your developers is going to pay returns on any of the equipment that you might be getting them. How many of you guys have like a work from home policy? That's awesome, most of you guys. All right. It's just as maybe a meta comment. It's when I first wrote the slide deck, it felt like all this stuff was kind of flowing, but it almost seems like it's kind of jumping around a bit. So I kind of started with talking about culture, but I've been really kind of diving into like all sorts of topics that I think are related to like a good workplace. And so definitely stop me and ask questions as we're going along. I wanted to talk about hiring, and because it's really difficult to find good people. And it doesn't have to be a good Perl person, because we've talked yesterday. We had a couple talks. Andrew and Julian were talking about how do we get somebody that doesn't know Perl to be a contributor, or how do we, train people. And what I'm looking for when I'm hiring is a good fit for the team, and they have to be I, like I say here, I don't want to settle, because I think that the hiring point is kind of it's a critical point for the team, and I guess it probably also depends on how many people you're hiring, because in my last several gigs, we've had a fairly small team. Like we've had between 5 and 12 people, or and so when you have a small team, the person you bring on board is going to be very critical to the success of the product and to everything, because they're going to influence and take part in the culture and the code and the routines and everything. So it's like you're not just interviewing interviewing for the skill set of whether or not they can write code, but you're almost kind of interviewing them like they're going to be your next roommate, or they're going to be like they're going to start dating your daughter. You know, like you want to take it really seriously and get a good feel for how the person's going to be interacting with. So
I think hiring for hiring for what you already have is actually not very good.
okay, can you expand on that? Like, have you had problems with hiring for a particular team?
In our company, we don't hire people. Are they the same? We are hiring people everywhere. So
Mm-hmm.
I draw abroad distributors.
Mm-hmm.
We are not hiring someone for a specific team. We are hiring someone for the group.
Mm-hmm.
And then we decide, well, we need people there, so they are going to work there.
Mm-hmm.
Not going to hire. Well, we have a bunch of people who all do things in a particular way, so we're going to hire someone who does things in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's very dangerous. You're stuck in a certain niche and you're not getting out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So when you allocate teams, you have to decide culture then. I mean, this person and this person are going to destroy the team by fighting every day. Let's not put them on the same team together.
Then you just have a problem with a particular person, and then you should make sure that the people, those people can work together. And you're not going to say, well, they cannot work together. Well, that's fine. That's a problem you should solve with those people.
Right.
And you're not solving it by putting like-minded people in a team. If you work at a company, you cannot work with other people. Well, either change or find another place to work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, I don't have any woman view or something like that. And then you actually
Of course.
a lot of if you're saying in your advert that you're hiring for a cultural fit, I'm not even going to bother to reply to it. I don't want to work with it.
It's interesting, because I feel the opposite, I suppose. Like I'm going to be spending so much time with these people, and I think when you have closeness with people, and I'm not saying a culture fit means that it's exclusive of any protected class, of course, like whether it's, men, women, or race, gender, any of these things. But people's personality is, and how they get along when they're working on the product together, they're working side by side, that has a huge impact on whether your team's going to remain intact and whether the people, whether they are having a good time and want to stay, or they were going to go seek out another opportunity where they feel safe. They feel like they can create. They feel like they're, you know, not going to be stepped on or judged or whatever kind of negative things might come up in a workplace. And I think that's what I'm talking about here for culture fit, but it's going to be different. Yeah.
That I'm currently working with 8 people from 5 different companies.
Mm-hmm.
That's not never going to be able to fit. We're not going to say we're only going to hire people from Europe
Mm-hmm.
because that restricts it too much.
I wouldn't say that a culture fit means all from Europe. I'm wondering if maybe I'm describing it incorrectly, or that it's conveying to you something other than what I mean. So
So if you instead said it's important the team get along with that,
uh-huh.
would you be
But
agreeable with that?
how would you know that if you're hiring?
Well,
And it's like in our company, people move teams on average every 6 months.
mhm.
But if you're a company with 10 employees, you don't have those options. So is it a big company versus small company problem? Is the problem solved?
So, but if you have 10 people, then likewise people, and you're hiring likewise people, then you will over the next 10 years, you will still be the same likewise people.
Yeah.
You're not getting any new blood. You're not getting any new ideas because you keep hiring the same type of people. You're not hiring good people. You're hiring people who are the same as you already have.
I could see where it could get there. Yeah.
I think you're the same person. That's most important. I don't want to work with you.
Yeah.
Period.
That's fair. Some
I want to work with good people. I don't want to work with people who are necessarily the same as me.
Yeah. And I'm the same. I feel the same. I want to work with smart people who have ideas to contribute. I want to get along with them. I want them to get along with each other, and I don't want there to be social barriers that are causing problems in the workplace or causing problems in communication or sharing creativity because if somebody doesn't feel safe. So, and that's fine.
Yeah, but I think if people don't feel safe, you should solve that in a different way, and you should not solve that by just hiring the same kind of people.
Mhm.
I mean, if you have a bunch of homophobic people, and that's a problem because you want to hire a gay person, you should not say, well, I'm not going to hire this gay people because of homophobic people, I'm just going to hire more homophobic
Well,
people. You have a problem, you should fix that, and you should not fix that by just hiring the same people with the same problem.
right. But that's not a scenario that.
But that's exactly the scenario you're describing because you don't want to have problems in the workplace. And you're solving that by basically hiring people which are similar instead of getting rid of the people that cause the problem.
Mhm.
Culture fit doesn't mean that people are exactly the same or they think the same. They can have different
That's how you
opinions,
start.
but
No,
having
I haven't.
having an open culture in a company doesn't mean that everyone is on the same page about every single subject. But if
Right.
we sit at our lunch table at work, you will have various options of what's happening, from very religious people to atheist people. We don't agree on everything, but we have a very open culture, and the people that we want is basically we want them to fit in our culture, to express themselves if they feel like
That's
Like,
right.
we challenge each other. That's the culture that we have.
Mm-hmm.
You're missing a point in your filter point. I think, yes, filter fit is important, but the point before that is you should have an open filter.
Of course.
Filter
Yeah.
scheme.
There's absolutely no reason, or it should never come into your mind to exclude somebody because of one of their beliefs or it's that's not what I'm saying. Culture fit is not trying to hire the same kind of person who's thinking the same way. We want to have people that have different experiences and new ideas to put onto the table. When I talk about culture fit, and I think somebody asked, like, how do you assess this? And one of the things we've done in a previous company is we'll have this as part of our interview process, where we just try to get to know the person, try to spend time, and it would be with a couple people from different teams that would come down and sit with the person during after the technical interview. And it was kind of like a soft skill interview. Can they articulate? Can they communicate? Are they somebody that you can get along with and sit across the table in a room and work on something? So I feel like I've failed in communicating to you what I'm trying to talk here, but maybe we can circle back on it if we feel like it. I always use an actual programming challenge. I've had an occasion where, so the way that I do it is when the candidate comes in, I give them a computer, whether of their whatever they want, whether it's Windows, Mac, or Linux, and then they can use any language that they want, and they just have to achieve a particular goal. And sit them in a room and have them work on that for 30 minutes, and then try to get an idea of what kind of resources are they using. Are they using Google, and what kind of searches? Like, try to get into their head and understand how they're approaching the problem is my goal. It's not necessarily finish the challenge or whatever it might be, because it also depends on the role, if it's like a DevOps role versus an engineering role. But I have things that I expect to see, or to help give me an idea if this person is able to actually deliver what they say they can during the interview. So it's not quite a whiteboard session. It's an actual, write some Perl or write some Java or whatever this person's most comfortable language is, to see if they're gonna get it done. I've had a guy get up from the interview and make an excuse and leave because he couldn't even do that. And I've had a lot. It's interesting how many people you can filter out of the queue just by having a technical challenge, to see whether they are interested in finishing it, whether they do finish it, and what their code looks like. Gives you an idea of what level they're at.
What are some good examples of things you can give them?
I would pick like some obscure things. So I would just set up like an RPC server, or set up like net HTTP, and just have like a RESTful service or something like that I spin up on a machine somewhere, and just have them write some code to hit it, and then pull down a JSON file and pull a result out of the JSON file or something. So not something wildly complex. If you're a seasoned developer, and maybe for the juniors who have stuff on their resume, I'm able to verify, like if they say they know how to use a database, then connect to this SQL server and pull down some values and do something with it, or so it's a way for me to assess their CV and attach some kind of a task that's going to help to prove whether or not they've got the skills to back up what's on the CV. Has anyone done anything similar, that sort of thing? Do you have a favorite?
So what we tend to do is we have a see how they think.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like we're not looking for them to like code words as such. We wanted to give them questions and things like that, and then we fire it up. I don't want to say too much.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But yeah, the goal isn't to get people to write the perfect answer immediately. It's to see how they approach the problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes they'll say, well, I use this library. It's like, yeah, that's great. Unfortunately, the machine you're on doesn't have an internet connection, so you're going to have to write to yourself. But I like that answer. I like people. I just go and get people to library to see that because that's what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And it's fine if they go and copy it from somewhere, or they go and scan the machine and try to find the answer, and it's just, it reveals something about how they think. I've done that with customer service crew too, of having them, give them a situation, an impossible situation, like you're gonna really anger these customers with this response. So go ahead and write the response, and that's the challenge. It can be applied to non-technical roles too, where you just want to get an example of how they're going to communicate, how they're going to articulate problems, and to also understand that, you know, it might be a real situation. You might have a fire on your hands, and they're going to have to be the ones dealing with it. I've noticed I have this slide in here. I was just curious with you guys, how big are your teams generally that you have working on your products? Do you have like giant teams working on one product, or do you actually have like Scrum teams that are working together just for particular parts of the product? How many of you guys have like crews of 10 or less? It's like, yeah. Yeah, just devs. Yeah. There's a good amount. And then for larger than that, like 10 to 20 or no? Yeah, I thought that'd be pretty normal. And I don't need to talk about that. But I have noticed on teams that there's the ones that are contributors that are getting a lot done. They're like the team leads, and then you have the others that are supporting the team lead and taking taking their work and helping to support and get stuff done. I don't know if this is normal. I'm not saying that this is something that you need in your team, but I think it's a pattern that I've been seeing. Would you guys agree that that's normal in your teams, that you have strong contributors and then you have those that are supporting the lead? Nah, maybe. All right. I'm running low on time. But so team motivation. Ways that I've helped keep the team motivated and stay is with money, paying well, giving bonuses, attaching the bonuses to goals, and I'll either do career path work with goals, or maybe I want to have them do improve particular skills. So I'll do quarterly goals, and then have that tied to particular activities that aren't necessarily tied to the product. So I can have them work on total side projects or new things that I need done, or maybe it's aligned with where they want to go in their career. So that helps. It helps the coworker to get a sense of achievement towards what they really want to do, because maybe they're on support but they want to write code. So setting up challenges on a quarterly basis has been successful. Yeah.
For two reasons, we found that was actually not very motivating, because most people were testing the maximum, so if you were not taking the maximum, people thought they wanted to punish them.
Yep.
And it was
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I can say too that the managing the bonus program is a lot of work. So especially if you have a lot of direct reports. So it's a lot of stuff to track and to keep fair and to be very clear on what you're defining as acceptance criteria. All those things, it just takes a lot of work. So if you'd rather be writing code, it might not be your thing. But the spot bonuses is also, that's where we just don't have a monetary reward, where if somebody did something outstanding, we just give them, $100 or a gift card or something to just show appreciation for their achievement. So that that might be something that you could incorporate if you don't have a goal program. But the goals in place of goals too, do you guys have anything like, do you allow time on the job for them to do experimentation and things like that, like free Fridays or anything, any programs like that?
No, we still have yearly bonus.
Mm-hmm.
I started working here with we don't have any free time. On the other hand, developers are getting a lot of freedom
Mm-hmm.
to decide what they want.
Yeah.
We also have what we call pick your own team.
Hmm.
People who have been in a team for a long time are actually encouraged to move teams.
One of the demotivators, I think, is always being in crisis. And so sometimes it's unavoidable if the product is just very unstable. But one thing that I appreciate in former workplaces is only really calling for the cavalry, like getting everybody to work the weekends or whatever the big push is, that's very infrequent. Because doing that often, particularly if your staff doesn't have skin in the game, like if they don't have stock or any monetary reward or compensation for working extra, you can't really do it often. I think calling on people's free time can be abused and a big demotivator. So that I think leads to burnout pretty quick. Just on healthy culture, I think it's important that we're just respecting everybody's time in the workplace. That as a manager, that if you're approached and somebody needs your attention, you gotta stop what you're doing if you can and give them some time. I guess these are just some things I describe my work environment that I want to achieve. I think the bottom line is just with your workplace, you can't expect it to just turn into something that you want without contributing to it. You have to turn it into the environment that you want. If you want it to be fun and competitive and transparent, you have to make it happen. You can't wait for somebody else to do it. So I think somebody said, legal concerns, of course, of, if it's a bunch of dick jokes all day long, like some people might get offended. They don't feel safe in that kind of environment. So you just balance it out so that it fits for the team on what fun means and how that can work for everybody, because it's above all, you really need to respect each other so that you can have a good relationship and get stuff done. Yeah. All right. Well, I'm over time, so that's it.